Climate change is already having widespread effects, and its continued progression will have profound consequences for the future. The impacts will affect not only natural ecosystems, but also human societies, economies, and global stability. Here's a detailed look at how climate change will affect our future across various sectors. Temperature rise and extreme heat. Heat waves and health risks. As global temperatures rise, heat waves will become more frequent and intense. Extreme heat can cause heat-related illnesses like heat stroke, dehydration, and cardiovascular problems. Vulnerable populations, including the elderly, children, and low-income communities, will be disproportionately affected. Increased mortality. According to projections, by the end of the century, heat-related deaths could increase significantly, particularly in regions like the Mediterranean, Middle East, and South Asia, which are already experiencing extreme temperatures. Sea level rise. Coastal cities at risk. Rising sea levels are already affecting coastal regions. Cities such as Miami, New York, and Mumbai, and entire countries like the Maldives, face the risk of flooding and permanent loss of land. Over the coming decades, low-lying regions could see extensive land loss, displacement, and migration. As coastal areas become uninhabitable, millions of people could be displaced. This may lead to what some have called climate refugees. Areas that rely heavily on coastal infrastructure for livelihoods such as fishing, tourism, and shipping will face economic devastation. Ecosystem disruption and biodiversity loss. Loss of habitats. Rising temperatures and shifting weather patterns will push ecosystems beyond their tipping points. Forests, coral reefs, and wetlands will face increased stress, with species unable to adapt or migrate fast enough. For instance, coral reefs, which support marine biodiversity, are already suffering from coral bleaching due to higher ocean temperatures. Extinction of species. With changing habitats, many species will face extinction. For example, polar bears and other Arctic species will be severely impacted by melting ice, while many tropical species are at risk from deforestation and changing rainfall patterns. Food chain disruptions. The loss of biodiversity could impact the global food supply, as many animals and plants are interconnected in food webs. Insects like bees, which are crucial for pollination, are being endangered by climate change, leading to potential declines in crop yields. Agriculture and food security are deeply intertwined with our climate. Shifting growing seasons, driven by changes in precipitation patterns and temperature shifts, will affect the length and timing of growing seasons, particularly in tropical and temperate regions. Crops such as wheat, maize, and rice may suffer from droughts or floods, and reduced agricultural productivity will put pressure on food supplies. Water scarcity is another critical concern. Changes in rainfall, coupled with increased evaporation from higher temperatures, will lead to more frequent and severe droughts. Regions that rely on consistent water sources for irrigation, like parts of Africa, the Middle East, and India, will face water scarcity, affecting food production. Rising food prices could be a consequence of these climate-induced disruptions to agriculture. This could lead to volatile food prices, exacerbating food insecurity, especially in developing countries. Water resources are also significantly impacted by climate change. The availability of fresh water will decrease in some regions and increase in others. Drought-prone areas like parts of Africa, South Asia, and the American Southwest will face increasing water stress, while other areas may experience more flooding due to heavy rainfall. Conflict over water is a growing concern. As fresh water becomes scarcer, competition for water resources will intensify. This could lead to conflicts within countries and between neighboring nations, particularly in areas like Central Asia, the Middle East, and parts of Africa. Climate change has profound health impacts. The spread of diseases is one of the most alarming issues. Warmer temperatures are expanding the range of mosquitoes that transmit diseases like malaria, dengue, and Zika. Additionally, floods and warmer temperatures can also increase the incidence of waterborne diseases like cholera. Air quality is another critical health concern. Rising temperatures and more frequent wildfires can worsen air quality, leading to respiratory issues, especially in urban areas. The spread of wildfires will increase the prevalence of asthma and cardiovascular diseases. As temperatures rise, there will be an increase in the demand for cooling, particularly in hot regions. This could put additional pressure on energy grids, especially in areas where energy infrastructure is not robust enough to handle spikes in demand. A global shift toward renewable energy sources is crucial for mitigating climate change. In the future, we will likely see an accelerated transition to solar, wind, and hydroelectric power, but this will require significant investment in new technologies and infrastructure. Climate-induced disruptions in energy production, such as lower hydropower output during droughts, could result in energy shortages, which would drive up energy prices globally. Displacement and migration, climate refugees. As mentioned earlier, rising sea levels, droughts, and extreme weather events will force millions of people to migrate. Regions like Sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, and parts of Central America will experience mass migrations due to uninhabitable conditions. Pressure on cities. Large urban areas will experience increased pressure as more people migrate from rural areas or climate-affected regions. This could strain resources such as housing, healthcare, and education, leading to social unrest and increased inequality. Economic impacts. Damage to infrastructure. Extreme weather events such as hurricanes, floods, and wildfires will cause extensive damage to infrastructure, including roads, bridges, and buildings. Rebuilding efforts will require significant financial resources and could slow down economic growth. Disruption of supply chains. Climate-induced disasters can disrupt global supply chains, particularly for agriculture and manufacturing. For example, major agricultural regions may see production declines, which would impact the availability of goods worldwide. Cost of adaptation. The cost of adapting to climate change, such as building flood defenses, transitioning to renewable energy, and providing healthcare for climate-related illnesses, will be enormous. Governments and businesses will face growing pressure to allocate funds toward these efforts. Global political stability, climate-induced conflict. The strain on resources like water and food could lead to conflict, especially in already volatile regions. Tensions over access to water, food, and arable land could spark wars or exacerbate existing conflicts. International cooperation. As climate change affects more regions, global cooperation on mitigation and adaptation will become increasingly important. International agreements like the Paris Agreement are vital, but the effectiveness of these agreements will depend on the commitment and actions of countries around the world. Conclusion. The future of climate change presents a complex and interconnected web of challenges that will affect almost every aspect of human life. From health to economics, food security to political stability, the impacts are far-reaching and potentially devastating. However, mitigation, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and adaptation, adjusting to the inevitable impacts of climate change, are key strategies to address these issues. Investments in renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, infrastructure resilience, and international cooperation are essential for minimizing the worst outcomes. The future is not set in stone. The actions taken now, at the global, national, and local levels, will determine the severity of climate change's effects on future generations.